The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello there, and welcome to another SLA CI Division podcast. This is your podcast for July, and today we're featuring Kate Vilches, who's a senior researcher with Lockheed Martin Missiles and Fire Control, and she is going to be speaking to us today about the 3 Ps, using patents, publications, and PR to answer strategy questions. But just before I begin, I want to thank the good folks at Aurora WDC who provide the technical support for today's webinar and are also quite supportive of the SLA CI division in many ways. So if you can check them out, aurorawdc.com, that would be great. So I'm going to hand you over to Kate, who is going to lead today's webinar. Hi, Kate.
Hi. Thank you for the introduction and for organizing this. My name is Kate Vilches. I'm a research librarian at Lockheed Martin Missiles and Fire Control in Orlando. I primarily do competitor/business research and engineering research. So today I'm going to talk to you guys a bit about just kind of hit the very high points of what kind of questions you might be able to answer using some freely available resources in the form of patents, journal publications, and public relations. So when I started in research, I did not realize what kind of information you could get from patents and journal articles other than the obvious. So I thought that might make an interesting topic to talk about. Some kind of questions that we have used to answer, or we have used patents or to answer, include questions about what kind of technology a competitor is focusing on. We've also looked at patterns. How have competitor priorities shifted over time? What areas, what kind of contracts are they not likely competing for, and what kind of areas might they be moving into? Also, how a competitor is likely to respond to an RFP, for example. Being a defense company, we respond to a lot of government requests for proposals, and so do our competitors. So we like to kind of role play out how they might be responding to an RFP so we can adjust our response as well. And then, of course, there's the company profile, which I think is standard in most industries. You might do a company profile of a particular competitor. You might do a company profile of a potential partner, a potential acquisition, or even someone you're just considering buying services from. Patents can be useful in this as well. You can look at what kind of technology the company makes. What are they patenting? You can look at who the main innovators in the company are, who is doing the research, who is kind of the movers and the shakers. This is especially helpful in areas that you're not, at least I find it particularly helpful in areas that I'm not familiar with. If we're looking at a company outside of defense or energy, which is our 2 main lines, I might work up a company profile to kind of help people get up to speed. So I took a picture of this this patent. This is actually a Lockheed Martin patent that I just pulled out of a database, just as an example of what kind of areas you might look at for when you're looking at patents. I mean, there's the title, which is pretty obvious. It has the good keywords there. The applicant will generally be the company, and then the inventors would generally be the employees who worked on that technology. I prefer to do my searches for keywords in the abstracts, the claims, and the titles, rather than doing a full text search, just to kind of narrow it down. The abstract is just like you'd have an abstract on a journal article. It just describes in a shorter text version what the technology does. Patents also can include images for people who are a little more technically minded than I am. Find that very helpful. I can't always tell what the images are showing myself, but it's good to know they're there. And patent information is really quite freely available, and I have some resources that you might check out for that. But using some paid resources can help as far as analysis and charting. We use Total Patents. It helps with that, but there's many others that are available. Another note about patents is that sometimes the areas that paid resources can be helpful with is sometimes the ownership of the patent will change as companies are bought and sold. And so many of the paid databases will help you track that. They can also be helpful if you're working with a company that might have patented information under several similar but not identical names. A lot of the paid resources will condense that into one standardized name, which is very helpful when you're trying not to miss information on, you don't want to miss a patent that's been patented under a different name, or a technology from a merger you might not have realized had taken place in the past. Some examples of information I found in patents are, obviously the kind of technology that's being used, but I've also found information when I've been trying to locate what address, like what site the technology has been developed. You can often see, like, if you look up here where it says inventors and it has what city they're in, if you can compare that information to what you might know about your competitors or your potential partners' corporate structure and say, okay, well, that's this division, that's that division. So that sometimes is helpful. I've also found information as far as like who is paying for some of the research. This might be kind of unique to government supported industries, but a lot will do contract research for the government, and that's kind of useful information to know in some cases. So you'll be able to see, it'll say this technology was developed under this contract occasionally. Another type of information you can find are in journal articles. You might be able to find where just like librarians or researchers might publish in Information Outlook, or the engineers will publish in SPIE, IEEE, and you can find some details on what kind of technology they are using. You can also, I found journal articles to be particularly useful in putting the technology into context in a way that patents don't necessarily do for someone who does not have always have the strongest of engineering backgrounds. And this information is very nice if you can cross-check it with the patents. You might pull the inventors from the patents and then cross-check it in the journal publications. You can search the patents you pulled from the keywords, and you can search the inventor names. You can do it vice versa too. If you have a journal article, you can go back and cross-check it against the patents. Journal articles are also very handy for, broad information on a competitor, a potential partner, vendors. I find journal articles to be particularly helpful in doing research on small companies, especially small companies that came out of university think tanks or university incubators. A lot of times in those companies, the CEO or the CTO is also the inventor, and they might also have a background in academic research, and you can find information there by going back and looking at some of their academic publications. You can also do a more broad search if you're looking for, say, a subject matter expert, and you can use journal articles for that kind of research. And you can sometimes find supplier or customer information. I've only found supplier and customer information in academic publications a few times, but every once in a while you'll find like a co-written paper or a case study. This is a screenshot that I pulled from SPIE, which is one of the databases we subscribe to, and it kind of gives you an idea of what kind of options might be available to you. I find the author affiliation searches in the databases that they're available to be particularly helpful for this kind of research. And like I've mentioned, if you have companies that came from academia or through university incubators, you can look at past affiliations and specific inventors' names. And then if you do have access, I mean, obviously you can do this in Google Scholar or a free database, but if you do have access to a large journal database such as Scopus or Web of Science, you might be able to some of these databases assign identifiers to the authors, so you can go through and again, like, combine people who are listed differently in different publications into one author, and that can speed things up a bit. And if you are using Google Scholar as a free resource, just as a note that you can also search patents at the same time. You can turn that on and off. You can also turn citations on and off. Now, I kind of lumped this last bit under public relations, but that's because the 3 Ps plus social media did not make a very catchy title. So for the purpose of this discussion, I'm going to kind of lump in public relations and social media. So press releases can actually, sometimes we dismiss them, but they can actually include some pretty relevant information. You might be able to get information on company structure from press releases. Big companies will send, well, even little companies, but they'll send out a press release when there is a change in the position someone has. Someone's moving, someone's retiring, someone has been hired from another company. They also announce recent contracts in press releases. And this is especially nice in industries or parts of the world where the contract process is not as transparent. So you might not get a lot of information, but it can help if you're trying to find out what businesses or what countries a business is doing work in. Supplier information, I find that press releases can be a good source of supplier information, especially from the supplier side. A larger company might not be too transparent over who its suppliers are, but the smaller companies tend to be pretty eager to trumpet their affiliation with the larger companies. So I send out press releases if they win a supplier award. I'm sorry about this. There we go. They might send out press releases if they publish a white paper with the larger company. Social media can also be useful. You can look at, in fact, a webinar I attended through SLA taught me this trick. You can look at patterns of hiring from LinkedIn and Indeed to see what type of vendors are being used at what sites, like areas of technical focus. You can also look and see what skill sets are being hired for through Indeed, LinkedIn, or even companies' hiring websites. That can help you narrow down what type of work is being done at what locations, or if they're using a particular software package, if you need to know that. And then social media posts can be helpful, especially when companies attend trade shows or conferences. They'll post pictures of their products, they'll post pictures of their booths, they'll let you know they're at the trade show to begin with. And so that can be valuable information when you're trying to find out what areas they might be targeting, or what kind of, see who their customer base is, or even just find out what their new products are. Then you can take all 3 of these topics and kind of merge them into profile. So I went ahead and put together a few rather, I will admit, sanitized and vague examples, but here are ways you might go about it. For instance, if you have an internal customer who's looking for information on a small private company to potentially partner with, maybe they're going to meet the company CEO at a site and they want to be prepared. Maybe they haven't gotten to that point and they're trying to decide if they want to contact this company at all. What you might start with is a patent search. You can say, put the company's name in, find out what kind of technologies they've patented, find out who the inventor names are, and you can pull from those patents additional search terms and kind of context for where you're going to go next. Then you might turn and do a publication search and say take any inventors that they have on their patents and find out where they published, what they've published, if there's any more details or context you can find from their papers. You can often find associates who are not listed on the patents. They might co-publish with them, but they might not actually be on the name of the patent, and you can spiral out and look at those experts as well. You can find leads to further technical information. It helps you make together a broader map. And then you might go to public relations. Sometimes I'll find social media posts that will advertise like interviews or sit downs with like the CEO or a inventor within the company that aren't coming up in my traditional news sources, aren't coming up in Nexus, aren't coming up in Defense News or Jane's. You might find company newsletters that are posted on the website or on LinkedIn or on any number of locations that might talk about new manufacturing methods or technologies and get insight from that. So that is one way that you can use these three and kind of cross-check against them to get a better idea of the company you're looking at. Another example, you might have an internal team that's preparing for a competitor analysis session that's what might be trying to answer a specific question, like, is this company likely to bid on this program that we are also considering bidding on? And if so, are they a strong competitor? And this is another way you might look at it, how you can break down places to look. So one question that's the most obvious is, has your competitor done this before? So you might take whatever the end goal of the RFP is and find out, break it down into components. Have they done component A before? Have they done component B, C, D? And then look in press releases. Often they'll talk if they've run tests or if they've been awarded contracts about this particular aspect of the requirement. You might also look again in journal publications to see if they've talked about that technology, if someone affiliated with that company has published on that technology. Do they employ a great deal of subject matter experts in this technology? And you can also look to patents for that information. What location are they likely to bid this work out of? Again, you can look at journal publications and see who is working on it. You can look at social media if they've put up, and traditional media, press releases, what is the dateline for these articles as far as location? And then you can check that against maybe say Hoover's or another database where you have a company structure. You can also look at LinkedIn. If you know who the program manager is, you can look at LinkedIn and see where they're located. What technology might they use? Again, you can go look at patents, journals, social media, trade shows, any place where technology information might be published, and kind of cross-check against, compare them against each other. What are they saying in journals, but also what kind of technology are they showing off in trade shows? What trade shows are they attending? What dealings has the company had with the customer? Trade shows and social media, I found, can be especially helpful with this question. If they go to a trade show that targets a particular type of customer, if they are quoted as having interactions with these customers at the trade shows. There are publications in each field that have good information on what goes on in trade shows, even if you don't have a person on the ground there. I find Shepherd Plus to be good for it in defense, but I'm sure there are some for each industry. But again, there's also what is posted on social media. They'll post where their booths are. They'll post what's going on, where they're presenting. They'll post pictures of their technology, and sometimes they'll post pictures of posing with other people in industry, and it kind of can help flesh out what is one of the trickier questions that I come across. And then there are other sources that obviously would inform these three main ones: contract awards, industry news, investor presentations, all things that you might look to. All right. And before we go off to questions, I wanted to share with you some sources. There are lots of subscription sources, but there's also a lot of free sources. I will admit I'm more familiar with the free sources from the patent side because my access to a paid patent database is only a couple years old. And I used several of these sources before I had that, and will sometimes still use them. The US Patent Office is obvious, but I find that using something like eSpaceNet or the Lens or Free Patent Online is sometimes a little more user-friendly. I'm less aware of some of the open and openly available aggregators for journal information. So if anyone has a good one they would like to share, please do. But I have used Google Scholar, I've used worldwidescience.org. Eureka Alerts often has press releases related to journal publications. I didn't list that one, but it would be one I should add here. And as far as paid sources, I'm sure you're all very familiar with them. There's Scopus, there's Web of Science. The patent one that I happen to use is Total Patents. And then, of course, you'll have your publisher and industry-specific databases. You might use IEEE, you might use SPIE, you might use OSA. So those are some ones that you can take a look at. And I promised Jim that I would leave 5 minutes for questions. So I think that puts us right about there. So if anyone has any questions, just let us know.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's very, very informative. So if you have any questions, please type them in the box on your GoToWebinar panel there, and I'll be happy to pass them along to Kate. We've had one person comment already that one of the data points they use is reviewing the patent status of the where it is along the process, and also specifically if fees have been received or if they've been not received. For example, it's been gaps in payment. That's actually very helpful.
Oh, that's a good one. I actually hadn't thought of that before.
To just see where it's at in the process, and that's quite brilliant. One question I had for you, Kate, is how much work do you do around looking at international patent search, and where a company may be headquartered in another country, and does their sort of research work there first, and then files it, perhaps so files in their country of origin, and then files in a United States subsequent to that. So how much of that would you be doing?
We do a fairly small amount of research in that area, though it is definitely growing. That's one thing I do like Total Patents for, and I don't want to sound like I'm shelling a vendor, so I'm sure that plenty of other vendors do the same, but they have machine translated patents, and then also I guess non-machine translated patents. I'm not sure what the term for that is, translated patents. And so that can be very helpful when you're looking at international patents. So it does come up. We'll have questions about companies that are based in other countries, and we will go and look at those countries' filings, and we'll also look at the countries we know the company does business in, and we'll look at those filings. What I have not done, just haven't had the need to, is compare the order of filings in the way you're describing, where you go and look at, well, they filed here in Israel and now they're filing over here in the United States, or that hasn't come up. So we've done like international patent research, but not like sequential international patent research.
Right. No, because I'm thinking of some other companies that might be, headquartered in Scandinavia that or that area that are in the defense industry, and may be filing, patents there first.
Mm-hmm.
Another question I had was with regard to press release services, and I know that you had mentioned about some of the sources. What is your sort of major source for press releases in order to see what's happening by industry? That's
for press releases, I have a very experienced colleague who has set up this gigantic RSS compiler. And it pulls from Business Wire, it pulls from PR Newswire, it pulls from WebWire, and it also pulls from some of the company's specific websites. Well, it used to be run through the Google RSS reader, but as that's been sunset, we've been using Old Reader. You can also find press releases. I don't use these to monitor, but I go back and look at old press releases through some of the like subscription services like Nexus. If you're having trouble finding something, they'll have press releases, and they'll also have earnings reports and investor presentations and the like there. But I would say Business Wire, WebWire, and PR Newswire are the three biggest.
Okay, perfect. I having worked in sort of the media industry, I know that just because it's not in the newspaper doesn't mean it didn't happen, and companies put out quite a number of, and newspapers will get thousands of news releases per day, but they can only use so many of them, and it's a fraction of what they get. So I find that to be a really helpful source as far as particularly for if they're doing collaborative efforts, or if they've signed a new partnership agreement or replaced a senior member of staff. I think that's really helpful to be able to search that out to see sort of strategic direction of where a company may be going for the profiles. So this has been an excellent webinar. This webinar today is a bit shorter than the rest of them, and I want to thank everybody for attending, and I hope you will join us again for our next webinar, which will be August 22nd, when we have Arthur Weiss, who's going to be going beyond Google with us. So that's August the 22nd, and we'll be sending out notifications for that. And Kate, I want to thank you again for this excellent presentation, and also to Aurora WDC for their ongoing support of our webinar series with the Competitive Intelligence Division. So everybody have a great day, and we'll hopefully see you in August. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.